Granta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Stitara Sata Sri Srimad Chidandi Goswami Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। जय जय श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're going to continue our reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 3rd chapter, text 18. Ayajaya Dhamasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshmam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrataha Ayajayad Dharmasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshvam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrata Ayajaya Dharmasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshvam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrata Ayajaya Dharmasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshvam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrata Ayajaya Dharmasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshvam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrata Ayajaya Dharmasutam Ashvamedaistrivir Vibhu Sopikshvam Anujay Rakshan Reme Krishnam Anuvrata Ayajayat, made to perform. Dharma Sutam, by the son of Dharma, Maharaj Yudhisthira. Ashvamedai, by horse sacrifices. Tribihi, three. Vibhu, the Supreme Lord. Saha, Maharaj Yudhisthira. Api, also. Kshmam, the earth. Anujai, assisted by his younger brothers. Rakshan, protecting. Reme, enjoyed. Krishnam, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Anuvrataha, constant follower. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord induced the son of Dharma to perform 3 horse sacrifices, and Maharaj Yudhisthira, constantly following Krishna, the personality of Godhead, protected and enjoyed the earth, assisted by his younger brothers. Purport. Maharaj Yudhisthira was the ideal monarchical representative on the earth because he was a constant follower of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. As stated in the Vedas, Ishopanishad, the Lord is the proprietor of the entire manifested cosmic creation, which presents a chance for the conditioned souls to revive their eternal relationship with the Lord, and thus go back to Godhead, back home. The whole system of the material world is arranged with that program and plan. Anyone who violates the plan is punished by the law of nature, which is acting by the direction of the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Yudhisthira was installed on the throne of the earth as a representative of the Lord. The king is always expected to be the representative of the Lord. Perfect monarchy necessitates representation of the supreme will of the Lord, and Maharaj Yudhisthira was the ideal monarch on this supreme principle. Both the king and the subjects were happy in the discharge of worldly duties, and thus protection of the citizens and enjoyment of natural life with full cooperation of material nature followed in the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira and his worthy descendants like Maharaj Parikshit. Om Agyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangalungayate Giri Satkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dunatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So Uddhava is continuing his reflection and now considering Yudhisthira's activities under the direction of Krishna. So now we're at the time that the Mahabharata war is complete. Yudhisthira is again the emperor of the world. And he's advised to perform these Ashvamedha Yagyas. Now, the Ashvamedha Yagya could be seen to be an emblem of proprietorship, which is the topic of this purport, proprietorship. In the Ashvamedha Yagya, a very special horse is let loose to wander over the course of a year. And wherever that horse goes, accompanied by hundreds and thousands of princes and soldiers and so on who are careful to protect this horse, wherever that horse goes, that land is considered then to become the property of that king who has performed that sacrifice. And if any king or ruler were to object, a battle would ensue to assert the authority of the king that is performing the sacrifice. So in one sense, this Yagya is an emblem of the sense of being the proprietor. And yet Srila Prabhupada chooses in this purport to come back and to emphasize the principle that only Krishna is the actual proprietor. He refers to Ishopanishad, Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam, Yat Kinchad, Tena Tyaktena, Bunjitaha. Who knew? You're all studying Bhakti Shastri. I remember this, but it's not coming. Tena Tyaktena Bunjitaha, Madgridaha, Kasya Svidanam. So, Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam. Ishopanishad declares that Krishna, the Lord, is the proprietor of everything, sarvam. Bhoktaram jagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suradham sarvabhutanam shanta gyatva mam shantim ichtati. I am the proprietor. I am the owner. But we think we are the proprietors. We think we own. We don't even own our own bodies. We don't even own the bodies that we reside in. They're given to us by nature, and they will be taken away by nature regardless of what we do. Nature will claim our bodies. So Prabhupada is emphasizing this principle that Maharaj Yudhisthira, he recognizes the proprietorship of Krishna. So his performance of the Ashvamedha sacrifice was not to expand his sense of king, of monarchy, his proprietorship, but to establish Krishna's proprietorship, being his representative. Maharaj Yudhisthira, he was engaged in the service of Krishna to establish Krishna's rule. I think it was you, Maharaj, Kavi Chandra, that you described how Yudhisthira didn't even live in his palace. Is that right? He lived in the cow shed. Was it you that?
That's what I read in Mahabharata.
Yeah.
Slept on the ground.
He slept on the ground. He lived with the cows. And then he would get up and go and do his royal duties? Because he understood this principle. I am not the proprietor. In our early days I was reminded of our early days in Henry Street here in New York, where we took this principle perhaps to the extreme. When I arrived in New York Temple in 1971, I found that there was a system of communal clothing.
We had that too in Berkeley.
You did it? Yeah. So you're taking it really to the extreme. Nothing belongs to you, right? Even a shirt on your back.
Even the Copans. Right?
The Copans, even the Copans. So at night, everything was dumped into a big pile, and someone was charged with taking it all down to the laundry, and they washed it all together, everything. We had these 2 washing machines, and then dried it all and brought it up, and then it was luck of the draw. If you got there early, you might get something matching. If you got there a bit late,
Near mama, nothing.
yes, near mama, nothing is mine. So the result of that was a lot of very, very mixed up looking people. That's where the origin of the mismatched socks comes in the image of an early brahmachari of ISKCON. From that, we took it even to a further extreme. I don't think, maybe you didn't do this in Berkeley. We shared toothbrushes. All the toothbrushes, this was to save time. The idea was we had just 2 showers for 100, I think it was about 80, 90 brahmacharis. It was, and we had 2 showers. So it was like 20-second showers. There was a guy, one devotee was there with his watch timing and so on. And for efficiency's sake, there was just one big bowl of chlorine, I think it was, or some sort of disinfectant that had all the toothbrushes in. You pulled one out and it was this assembly line. Anyway, that was a bit extreme. So what do we do though? All right. The verse of Ishopanishad does say, yes, Krishna is the controller, but it also says that each one of us has some allotted facility. Srila Prabhupada makes the point often that there is enough, that there's enough food, there's enough facility, there's enough to go around. And we should be satisfied with what we get. But then I was thinking about another saying that we've heard, and Srila Prabhupada has used this saying. It's an old English saying, that proprietorship turns sand into gold. You've heard that saying?
And communal living turns gold into poop.
and communism. This is what we've seen. Look at the communism of the Soviet Union. Did it advance economic? No, people were standing in line for hours just to get a loaf of bread. So there is some truth to this, that when there's self-interest, when there's self-motivation, when there's a sense of proprietorship, when you own something, it's yours, then you tend to take care of it, you tend to nurture it, you tend to cultivate it. We've had in Mayapur, we had some experience that we were trying to engage the devotees in farming. And say, here's some land, farm the land, give a portion of your produce and farm it. But we said, you don't own it. You don't own the land. Not only that, but to prevent you, because of the laws of West Bengal, the laws of West Bengal are such that if you can show that you've been farming a piece of land for any particular period of time, I think it's like 6, 7, some number of years, you then can claim the right of a sharecropper, basically, sharecropper rights. It's called bargadar. And you cannot be evicted from that land without a lot of court battles. So to prevent that possibility, ISKCON would move the farmers. He says, okay, this is your land, but you only can farm it for 3 years, and then you've got to go somewhere else. We'll give you some more land. And the result is that they did it for a while, but because to make that land truly fertile, you have to invest in it. Build the land, especially if you want to do it organically. And so the incentive, because I'm going to be gone after a few years, and they just threw chemicals on and whatever they could do, and eventually they all quit. So we can see this practically, that when there is a proprietorship, when people, in your own life, I mean, all of you, I'm sure you have this experience, that the things that you own, that you take care of them, much more than those things that cars have been another example of ISKCON experience where,
Spiritual cars.
Yes, somebody is, given a car.
Karma for those cars.
Of course, there also, we had in Henry Street, we had a great system because we had our resident mechanic, Anutama Prabhu, who went on to make a good amount of money on cars. He's done quite well. But he would acquire like 2 or 3 VW Bugs, these Beetles, because you could swap the parts, right? So he'd always keep one of them running by taking one part from another. So proprietorship, where does it fit in our devotional life? So I was thinking about Maharaj Yudhisthira. He is the official monarch. He is the ruler. But his attitude was, although he was the proprietor, so to speak, he didn't consider himself to be the proprietor. So his mentality was not that of the proprietor, but that of the servant. So when we engage proprietorship in the service of Krishna, when we take responsibility, then we become, instead of calling ourselves proprietors, we can call ourselves stewards. The term steward is perhaps more appropriate. We recognize that everything belongs to Krishna. Even our bodies belong to Krishna. But we are given certain facilities. And those facilities that we're given, we have to recognize that they belong to Krishna, but they're ours to take care of. We have to take responsibility as servants. That's the plan. Srila Prabhupada describes that the entire material world has been arranged to teach us, to develop in us, to bring about a transformation of our consciousness from that of being the proprietors to that of being the servants. And in that respect, Srila Prabhupada points out that the servants, just like the sons of the children, let me put this back here, sit here. What does he say? Oh, maybe that was somewhere else I read this. About Srila Prabhupada was talking about how this principle of Krishna being the owner is reflected, though, in his care for all of us, that he provides whatever we need. But the other sense here is, do we try to get more than we need? So this gets into a very kind of complex situation, particularly for the grihastas. Now, the brahmacharis, hopefully, are in the mentality of austerity, renunciation, and accepting just what they need in order to engage in their service. And it's a necessity. We need food, we need clothing, we sometimes need a particular kind of food. But we're not looking to increase our bank balances and our wardrobes, and of course we do accumulate books. That's something that I've seen devotees like to increase their wealth of shastras, and that's okay too. And we take care of these things. We do have feeling of being the stewards. But what happens when you enter the grihasta ashram? And now you're taking care of a family, and you're thinking, oh, now I need maybe a bigger house. Then what about the future? And the mentality of acquiring and gaining and developing and building starts to enter in. And then what happens? The devotee can start to begin to feel that it's all theirs. And what arises out of that, the problem that arises is then envy comes in. Envy of others. Envy of others and what they have. Exploitation starts to show up, where in order to get more, someone begins to exploit another. Even to the point of thievery, because the mentality is actually based on a thieving idea. Prabhupada relates this, that when we do not recognize the proprietorship of Krishna, we become thieves. We become moral thieves, perhaps, according to some rules. And Srila Prabhupada gives that sort of, he talks about that, honor amongst thieves, where you have a group of robbers and they've gone to steal something, and they come back and now they're sitting down, they say, okay, now we have to divide this honestly. Right? They've just been engaged in a robbery, the most dishonest profession, and now they're going to be moral, right? They're going to divide. So they have to have honor amongst their thievery. So this is our similar situation, that in our capitalistic society, we think that by the dint of capitalist rules, because capitalism works according to having rules, we see that wherever there are good rules, good systems, good governance, and so on, then capitalism can thrive. Without the government's role, capitalists find themselves in a situation where their proprietorship, because to be a capitalist means you have to have some security of ownership, that you own what you say you own, and then you can then develop it, and that's the whole principle of capitalism. It's tied to ownership. So, what happens if we don't balance our sense of ownership, which is necessary for productivity in the material sphere? Especially, I'm speaking now particularly for the grihastas, who have to engage in some kind of efforts to maintain their families. If we don't have this basic underlying principle, then we'll find ourselves
in difficulty. But if we don't recognize that we are the stewards, we are not the ultimate owners, then janasya mahoyam maham mameti. We simply think it is me and it is mine. And then that will result in further degradation in this material world. But if we take the plan of the Lord, we take the plan, the actual plan of this material world to rectify that sense of independence, to rectify that sense of being the master and the Lord, to bring us to the point of servant, then we can engage in the world using the varnashrama system in order to realize what Srila Prabhupada called spiritual communism. This is an ideal that we are still looking to discover how that will work. I live in Mayapur half the year generally, or sometimes more, and we are far from being able to claim that we've developed any sort of spiritual communism. We may have increased the capitalism in that area quite significantly. Based on proprietorship, basically because we've I don't know about encouraging, but we certainly have facilitated or at least accepted in our community the most fundamental form of capitalism, which is real estate. You sit down and say, this is my land, and then you divide it up, and then I'm not an economist, but there's a term called the rent, something of rents. Anyway, there's some terminology which is based on this idea that this is my land and I'm going to produce money out of the land simply not by producing anything, really, but just by owning it. This system is, in the capitalist system, this is very, very prominent. Simply by owning something, claiming ownership, you can make money. Right? You claim you own the land, you can rent it out. You claim you buy stock in a company, you don't do anything. You have no actual material role in running that company whatsoever. But because of that piece of paper that says, I own a share of this company, you're entitled to X amount of, dividends. So this principle of owning, not working, not doing anything to actually produce anything, but simply by owning something, making money. And I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I think that some huge percentage of the economic activity of this world today is simply based on false ownership, on ownership. I own this stock, I own this Bitcoin. Somebody makes something called Bitcoin, and somebody says, now I own such and such amount of Bitcoin. How much will you pay me for this? And somebody says, okay, I'll pay you such and such. All right, I'll sell it to you for this. And then the next, well, now you got to pay me more. And this way, the value, so-called value of this completely nothing thing, it doesn't exist. It's just numbers in some computer. And this now becomes worth thousands and thousands of dollars. Recently, there's a new commodity on the market. What is it called? Non-fungible or fungible non-fungible NFA, I think, non-fungible assets. Something that doesn't exist, right? It's just artists are doing this now. They're making these digital things that are just bits of bytes on computers, and it looks like something, and of course anyone can reproduce it hundreds of millions of times, but they sell for millions of dollars. Now somebody owns this. So this idea of ownership is producing so much so-called wealth in the world, but what it's also producing is so much disparity. The gaps between those who have just enough And those who have huge, huge wealth has just widens and widens and widens. This is not the plan of Krishna, to have such great disparity. Rather, the plan is to have ideal monarchs like Yudhisthira, who recognize that they're servants, recognize that the land, the products of the land, it all belongs to Krishna and must be used in his service. That is where proprietorship can be utilized. In the Vedic times, there was some proprietorship. We know that because we have stories of incidences where King Nimi comes to mind, where one cow was given to another and then wandered into another person's herd, right? So there was, and then there was anyway, the big argument took place over the ownership. So we have some sense of even ownership of land. We have some sense that there's some boundaries in the Vedic system. In other cultures, particularly the Native American culture, didn't have this sense of ownership, didn't have this sense of land boundaries, was more attuned to the idea and the understanding that it was all belonging to God. They did have some tribal sort of boundaries and would fight with each other over those. But because they didn't have this sense of ownership resulting in rents, the British were able to simply make some deals with the famous, trinkets, basically, things and they then started putting some lines on the land and said, okay, now this is ours. So these systems, yes, they turn sand into gold. They do that. But what is the result? If you take sand and you turn it into gold, yes, now you have gold. But have you lost your sense of who you are? Does proprietorship, it turns sand into gold, meaning that yes, you produce something good, but it also turns something useless. Another way to look at it is that by thinking you're the proprietor, you're taking something that you don't actually own and considering it to be so valuable, making it gold in your eyes when it is actually simply sand. Our bodies are a good example. We value our bodies as gold. No one can come up to you and say, well, here, give me your body and here, take this, I've got a big pile of gold here, take the gold and give me your body. No one will exchange. The most precious thing that we have are our bodies, and we fight for them, and we do so many things to maintain the body. Ultimately, that's all we really think we have, but we don't even own that body. But we think it is gold. And it is actually just sand. From dust to dust. That is the end result. But if we use these bodies, we use whatever comes to us, we recognize they belong to Krishna, and we use them in his service, then they become truly valuable. And in that sense, we can exercise a servant proprietorship. We can take care of things. We should take care of things. And we should utilize especially for the grihastas, we should utilize our energy to produce for society and for Krishna. And there's no harm in, making a little nice place to live in. But if we start thinking, I must have the latest car, I must have, a house with a mansion to live in, and I must have, a wardrobe the size of the brahmachari ashram, then this is the mentality of the thief, wanting more and more and more, without recognizing who it belongs to. So, these are the lessons that I have picked up from here. This is the plan, Prabhupada says, this is the plan of Krishna to arrange this world in such a way to teach us that we are simply servants. Because as servants, it all works out. If we ignore our position as a servant, then we'll end up in battle with someone else, either individually or as a country or in some way. But if we will not have peace. But if we consider Krishna, Bhoktaram Jagya Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, if we see that he is the proprietor, and he is also our dearest friend, Suradam Sarva Bhutanam, then Gyatva Mam Shantamijti. This is Prabhupada's peace formula, to recognize that Krishna is the proprietor. Then we can have peace. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Haribo. We have a few minutes for comments, questions. Yes. Mukunda.
How do you go about using the stuff that comes on its own accord, but that they are not necessary for our, or we don't have a use for it, but sometimes they come on its own accord without doing any effort, and sometimes the tendency is, just give it to me, but sometimes we find that we over-accumulate stuff that we don't have use for it in our own life, or...
Yet, we'll have some use for it in the future, right? I mean, that's what happens. We think...
No, we have, the Krishna hole. Now we have to pay to get rid of it, Or in your own life sometimes, you sometimes give you something. And then the Isabhasya principle is about rejecting stuff that are not useful.
Well, there's two questions here. One is, what should we do when we're offered something that we don't really need? Okay, so that's one question. Should we accept it? Should we reject it? And then the question is, I guess your next question is, well, what do we do with all the stuff that we accept that we don't need? Is that your question?
Well, the first is a question. The second one is just the result of how you go about the first question.
Well, one thing is that, at least as devotees, we do have some responsibility to try to accept what's offered. Because when somebody is offering something, then they want to engage in devotional service. They're trying to give something to Krishna. And so our service is to engage others in service to Krishna. So when somebody's offering something, then we should think, can this be used somehow in Krishna's service? Can we find a use for it? Now, if it's something that is going to actually take away from Krishna's service, just take up space or whatever, or there's been cases where people have offered us land or buildings, or things like, or somebody may come up here and say, hey, I've got this broken down car. It needs a new transmission, and it needs, it won't pass inspection, and it's got 4 tires that are about to blow up and no brakes, but here, it's yours. So in that case, it's probably, I think it's legitimate to say, sorry, but take it to the junkyard, and whatever money you get from junking it, you can give that money. So, yes, we have to be discriminating in what we accept in our lives or in our service. And then what do we do when we find that, well, we accepted something thinking we could use it, and then we can't? Then we have to give it away. As householders in Mayapur, we do have occasions where people give us little gifts and things like that frankly, we're not really that much interested in, just the other day, where were we? We went to, I hope they're not listening. They may be listening on the line. We went to the Janmashtami program in Queens. And everyone was given a very nice chadar. But these were Harinam chadars, these were saffron Harinam chadars. And, we were, of course we must accept this gift, it's appropriate. But then it's not something that we would use. So now we have the opportunity to give to someone else. So that kind of flow of gifting is another, there's actually a whole term called the gift economy, where people give and things are flowing not based on money exchange, but on the basis of giving. So that is another aspiration that we have, to have a giving economy where people are giving, and what comes into our hands, if we can't use it, then we give it away. It goes on. It goes forward. What is it called? Pay it forward. So yeah. Does that answer your question at all? A little bit. You still don't know what to do with everything in the Krishna hall.
Thinking maybe all the Eastern temples should have like a thrift shop.
Yes.
Sell all the stuff.
Yeah. That's
Keep flowing.
keep it going.
This now with redoing the Krishna room.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah, what do you do with all that? Anyway, we'll find somebody to give it away to. Hare Krishna. Any other comments, questions? Thank you. I hope I've done a little bit of exposition on this very deep principle. Where does proprietorship, where does it fit into our lives? How do we deal with stuff? Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.